Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting from our ancillary bunker linked to our main Freedom Bunker in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, here live for you every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern, 24/7, with extra shows, content, guests, analysis, and archives, and at davejanda.com. Stop on by. You will not be disappointed. I guarantee that. But I do guarantee that you will also be educated and empowered every time you go to davejanda.com. With information you will never get through the bought-off lamestream fake media. And this next segment is yet another example. We had the latest version of the aeronautical version of Where's Waldo this past week with Where's the F-35? To the point where the Pentagon put out a press release saying, if those folks over South Carolina happen to know where our jet landed or ended up crashing, please let us know. No, I'm not kidding you. Now, it's interesting when you watch the bought-off lamestream fake media, because I have to do that in order to tell you what they're saying and what's wrong, right? They had absolutely zero experts talking about this. They had, I think, the claim to fame of every person I saw in the bought-off lamestream fake media is every time they get on a plane, they fly first class, right? Yeah. Well, contrast that to the contacts we have with Operation Freedom, including my next guest, Commander Scott Snow. Scott has 3,200 hours in a fighter, 2,025 of which were in F-14, 618 landings on an aircraft carrier. And as opposed to like flying over South Carolina, he has 335 hours in combat where people are shooting stuff at him. Okay. So I cannot think of a better source to have join us today and speak about this F-35 event where a plane, went missing, then was found crashed, and whose pilot ejected. It is my honor. Oh, by the way, Scott, in addition to all that, I could give you a long list of his service to our country and his pedigree, but a couple important other points other than the hours flown. He was formerly in charge of operations for the Top Gun program and for all carrier activities in the Pacific. Right. Scott will tell you what you will never hear in the bought-off lamestream fake media. It is my honor to welcome back Commander Scott Snow. Scott, welcome back to the Operation Freedom Show and platform.
Well, thank you, Doc. It's a pleasure to be back with you again.
So, Scott, let's talk about where's the F-35? So, first of all, Scott, the whole event just seemed off, right? Including the 911 call of the guy from a house who had the pilot who, I guess, parachuted into his backyard, and he made the 911 call. Everything from soup to nuts was off. So, Scott, let's first talk about ejecting from a fighter. You and I have spoken about this, but our listeners need to hear this conversation. So, as a fighter pilot, 3,200 fighter hours, 2,025 in an F-14, 335 combat hours. What are the reasons, Scott, that can occur in a cockpit why a pilot would eject?
Well, there are a couple reasons. So, like in the Tomcat, if you lost both hydraulic systems, you no longer have control of the airplane. So you could still have the engines running, but you can't manipulate the flight controls and continue to fly. So that would be one reason to hop out. Another reason would be catastrophic engine failure. And when you look at single-engine airplanes, and we would practice this in the adversary F-16 all the time, is simulated flame-out landings, where you would go and glide this thing down at 210 knots, lose about 7,000 feet of altitude from overhead where your intended point of landing is to come around at a 7-degree nose-down pitch all the way down to come in and land. Other is fire. If that thing's on fire, you don't want to be on fire, and you want to get away from it. So eject is kind of the last voting member leaving the aircraft. So as a fighter pilot, you're going to do everything you can to get that airplane safely down on deck. But what perplexes me is that you're going to put it on altitude hold. And I got this from one of the F-35 design engineers. They have a wing level button that they can push that's been integrated into that system, as well as a altitude hold. Same thing we had in the F-16. We had the altitude hold. And pushing that before you hop out of an airplane just doesn't make a lot of sense.
So, and when this, and you've described, Scott, and tell me if my description is right, flying an F-35 is like flying a flying brick. Is that fair to say?
An aerodynamic brick, correct. And it's one, this is the F-35B that also has an auto-eject feature to it, because if the engine in the back doesn't drive the lift fan in the front, that thing is, if that stops, that's immediately unstable, and you as a pilot would not have reactive time fast enough to pull that handle and get out when that thing takes off. And if people have seen that video where, it's hovering and then it goes and it starts doing the buck and bronco, and then poof, it shoots out. I would not doubt that was a auto ejection from that. And the person flying it was probably 5, 10, 15 feet off the ground when it started going haywire. But you're basically, you made so many compromises in making that thing go up and down, and then you're going to have the Air Force version and the Navy version, which you're not going to have that lift fan issue to it. But you made so many compromises in making that thing so fat and wide to have that lift fan in there, so the Marines and the UK, the Brits could go up and down to replace the Harrier. So that engine turns off, it's over. There's not a lot of glide characteristics in something that's a brick.
So then, Scott, you educated me on this, that one of the unfortunate reasons for a loss of thrust is actually running out of gas, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So, but if that was the case here, from where the pilot ejected to where they found the plane was 80 miles, right?
Yeah, it did not run out of gas. So that engine kept running. And what perplexes me is why would you be hopping out in that circumstance? If you have a good motor, good hydraulics, I'm flying the airplane. That's what just it worries me that there's someone that's going to make that decision and hop out. And a couple other things that stand out so much from that 911 call. And one, I've never met a Marine that is not proud to say that he's a Marine. It's like, oh, no, I'm a military pilot guy doing stuff, and I'm 47 years old. Dude, if you're 47 and you're flying an F-35, you have got to be at least a very senior 05, if not an 06, in the military, which in the Marine Corps would be a lieutenant colonel or a full bird colonel at 47. So I'm just completely flabbergasted on that call, and just nothing really is adding up correctly from that call. And then, well, I'm not quite sure where the airplane is now. Granted, Dave, with that, anytime you eject from our higher end aircraft, it's going to basically black box and crypto dump everything out of the airplane. So you're not going to get the IFF. You're not going to have an ELT in that thing. It's everything. Basically, it's going to go black, and then they're going to go and pick up the pieces and probably smash the boxes out of it anyways, because that's highly sensitive information that we don't want going anywhere. So it's almost a race for you better find that airplane before someone else does, because the intelligence compromise that could become if they find an F-35 somewhat intact could be devastating.
And Scott, there were some people that surmised, the pilot just hit the wrong button, and that's why they ejected. I mean, because obviously you didn't run out of gas. it went another 80 miles from when the pilot ejected. No one has said that there was a fire on board. So Scott, you just can't hit like, oh, with your elbow. Oop, I hit. Whoa, I'm getting ejected. I mean, that can't happen, can it?
No. It is. Now I've had, in the history of the F-16, I know there have been 3 accidents where pilots were trying to relieve themselves and lost control of the aircraft and ended up hopping out, which is not really a good way to explain it to the boss when you're back down. But
yeah, right.
Hopping out, it's the ejection sequence and pulling the ejection handle is not a mistake. That it's a very deliberate act to do that.
So here's the question I have, Scott. Is it possible with this frame, the F-35, that the systems failed because they got hacked, and in the process of hacking, you could also hack ejecting a pilot? Is that possible?
In my estimation, yes. It is 100% possible. It's one of those, it's the Integrity 178B operating system that runs the F-35, it runs the B-2, it runs the F-16, it runs the F-22, it runs the A320 airliner. And just from a layman's perspective, anyone I've talked to that flies an Airbus product, they're like, what's it doing now? I don't know. Because it's all computer controlled and computer driven. And I haven't had guys that had to pull out circuit cards directed by their maintenance because the airplane kept taking its own wave up when they get to 200 feet. So do I think it's possible that would be hacked into? 100%. And it's also one that if you have something that has an auto eject feature to it, what's going to tell that seat to go off? It's going to be the computer. The entire aircraft is a flying computer system, and it's everything out. Just the mechanics of that airplane flying is an afterthought. It's they want this computer system that's going to integrate and do everything. They want that computer system to also control drone aircraft. So you send out one with a person in it, and you have 4 other airplanes that are now your wingmen that are all controlled from the computer in your airplane. So do I see it possible that it got hacked? Absolutely. Yeah, it's one where it's a ripe market for many other friendly and unfriendly countries to sell that kind of technology, and it goes to the highest bidder.
And Scott, within a day of this happening, maybe even hours, 12 hours of this happening, the government ordered a 2-day stand down for all military aviation inside as well as outside the United States. So does that speak to the possibility of a potential hack event? What is that? When you hear that, what red flags go up for Commander Scott Snow?
Well, oftentimes, if we have a rash of accidents that we have, one is an anomaly. We have 2, now we have 3 in close proximity, you're going to have a safety stand down. And it's one where you bring your squadron in, you talk to everybody, hey, let's get back to blocking and tackling and doing everything right, checking all the boxes, and getting back to the business of flying and projecting force forward with our aircraft, with our aircraft carriers, so on and so forth. What hits me a little bit is there were 2 events. There was one which was an Osprey going down in Australia, and then this with the F-35. But there's several weeks in between, and to me, that this one was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to have a safety stand down that quickly with everything.
And Scott, when we first started talking about this, before they found the plane, you spoke about the F-35s have this ALIS system, the automatic logistics information systems. That appears to be a bit of a weak link. Is that a misstatement? And can you educate our listeners on what that system is?
No, well, that system is the brains. It's if you look back to 2001 and HAL, Dave, this is exact. I wouldn't touch that if I were you, Dave. That's what this system is. It is the brain stem of that entire platform, and it's one where it does everything from it's supposed to tell you what part is failing, what part needs to be replaced, what this piece and what the flight controls are going to do here. And at that point, the pilot's just a voting member. It's like he gets to push a button that goes to a computer, and then that computer goes to the Alice system, to the main computer, and says, hey, the pilot is asking the airplane to do this. Can we do this? Sure. And then off it goes. So it is one where I could only imagine from the maintainer perspective is that they will never have a daughter and they will never name her Alice because of this system.
So, Scott, when you boil everything down and you put everything on your radar screen that's been put on the table now for the past week and a half, what do you think happened here?
I think there was a breach. There was a compromise. And it just, nothing is adding up to why even if there was weather, you're in one of the most sophisticated fighter jets in the world, and flying with a heads-up display. You have a wingman that was right there with you, and why that wingman didn't follow your airplane to where it finally impacted, none of it makes sense. It's one of those where I really think that operating system got jumped into, because it's one where, look at any other computer controlled enterprise. You have people that can hack into a Jeep Wrangler and make the windshield wipers go and the throttle, go up, full throttle, no throttle, turn the engine off. We've become so utterly dependent on these computer-controlled systems, and any computer can be hacked into. I hate to say it. Unless you have a closed-loop system with no outside inputs, then there's always a way in, and they'll find it.
So, Scott, we see things heating up in and around Taiwan. Reportedly, there have been there's not a naval blockade at this point by mainland China on Taiwan, but reportedly there's an ever-growing fleet of mainland Chinese ships naval ships in and around Taiwan. We hear reports, not in the bought-off lamestream fake media, but reports that there are ongoing probing and penetration of airspace events by communist Chinese mainland fighters over Taiwan. So, Scott, just as let's just throw this in the air, could we be coming to an event occurring in China or in Taiwan? And you've always told me, Scott, that actually, September, a little bit of October, are prime weather times where if China's going to move on Taiwan weather-wise, that's the window. Could we be getting close to an event in Taiwan, and this was a message getting into this F-35 system by China to say, don't even think about sending fighters over to help Taiwan, because guess what? We'll make them fly in bricks in a nanosecond. Scott, is that a possibility, you think?
I think that's 100% a possibility. It's one where spectrum dominance is what you need to win a war. And for being 100 miles away, and that's the distance we're talking about from China mainland to Taiwan, it's 100 miles. We're coming from 1,000 miles and change to get there. It's logistically nearly impossible. And you think about all the airborne gas and logistics of ships and everything to try and go there to defend someone from, making that quarterback sneak of 100 miles. And if they control all the spectrum, if they control RF, which is radar, if they control all the beeps and squeaks and electronics, and they prove to us that, hey, if you have a computer dependent aircraft, and either one, we can hit it with an EMP and smoke check it, or we can hack into it and you're a flying brick, and you're no longer combat capable because you've been compromised. That speaks volumes. And believe me, there's nothing happens by chance with those folks. They have a 100-year, they have a 150-year plan, and they're very calculating in the way they look at warfare. And spectrum dominance is that's what they're after.
Folks, we're speaking with Commander Scott Snow, 3,200 fighter hours, 2,025 hours in an F-14, 618 landings on aircraft carriers, and 335 combat hours. So, Scott, as I mentioned in your introduction, you ran operations for the Pacific Fleet as far as aviation. So, yes. Scott, if you were still doing that, and this just happened with the F-35, and now there's this 2-day stand down, and you're in charge of aviation operations in the Pacific Fleet, which includes, by the way, Taiwan, right? Scott, what would you be doing right now?
Well, it'd be back to the drawing board. I was a battle watch captain for that entire mission. And the big thing you look at it is become so computer dependent, connectivity dependent, that we completely lost track of just blocking and tackling and making it happen. So at that point, we've leveraged so much into the world of, this is neat and shiny, and we can internet this and cybersecurity this, and this is going to be all our communications, everything else. Well, what if that goes poof? And now we're back to carrier pigeons and flashing lights to each other across the horizon on ships. That's what I would start looking at, is how do we get back to the basics of how do we operate in a spectrum-denied environment, and spectrum being everything from internet to communications to radar to everything. Everyone is the blind man in the room, walking their stick around. Who do you know who is friend or foe, and how do you now execute a war plan with that?
Scott, educate our listeners in our concluding minute and a half how folks can follow your efforts and what you're up to.
Well, I'm on the general media, social media, so Facebook, Instagram. You can find me there, Flake Fighter, as well as Truth Social. And if you want to go down the lines of preventative health, then rebalancehealth.com is a good friend of mine that they do some fantastic stuff, and they can